full employment, we haven't seen a slowdown in consumer demand. I don't care what it is. Is it insecticide? Is it greeting cards? Is it commercial kitchens, cupcakes, gym equipment, wireless charger? We have all that stuff. We haven't seen a slowdown yet. And at the same time, you're watching all this doom and gloom, and I see it too. And so do the CEOs of these companies. And their decision, the hard part of all this is what to do about inventory going into holiday and Q1. Do you pull back because you think this recession is going to hit us in Q4, which we're basically in right now, and holiday's coming up in a few weeks, extended holiday this year by over 3 days, which if you're doing 200 million or 150 million in sales, a lot of inventory. And so you're trying to gauge the pessimism out there as the stock market tries to forecast the future in 2023. Meanwhile, your sales are humming. So do you want to leave anything on the table? And more of a perplexing situation coming out of the pandemic is most of these companies have gone past 50% direct-to-consumer models. Big, succulent margins, direct-to-consumer, bypassing retail, advertising digitally, acquiring customers economically. They know their CAC, they know their subscription services, they know the attrition rates. They're making money, and if they sell product online that they don't have to ship, well, you should burn in hell in perpetuity for that. Well, there has been a change in investor sentiment regarding investing in small business, and here's what it is. Because of what occurred during the pandemic, this remarkable digital pivot, I call it, America 2.0, where companies that pre-pandemic, if you look at the pie chart of revenue, it would have been 50% through retail, 40% through Amazon, just another retailer, except you don't get the data from them, 10% your own website. That's completely changed. The successful companies that went through the pandemic, even Amazon went to essential goods only, if you remember, in February, March, April, and May of 2020. So those companies had to build out their own platforms and start acquiring customers. So if you look for an A round or a B round or a C round in a small business now, and you go to the investor community and say, look, I'm looking for money, the first question every investor's analyst asks you, and we're no different, do you know your CAC, your customer acquisition cost? Do you know your attrition rate of customers? Do you know the lifetime value of that customer? And are you now past 50% direct to consumer? Because when you get past 50% direct to consumer, you get something more valuable than anything. You get data, your own data, size, preference, flavor, frequency of purchase, price point, regional disparities on flavors and all kinds of sizes and differences in people's preference.
And this is a societal problem. This is not just a small business problem. We cannot have small businesses fail because they're not digital businesses. Mm-hmm. So in many cases, it is that education, it is those tools, it is empowerment, it is mentorship, it is enabling them to mine data the way Kevin's talking about. So they have a legitimate competitive proposition in the digital space. Now, what we also see is that when you are a service business, your digital proposition is a little stronger as a small business than a large business. So for example, tax accounting or any small business that affords or offers a service tends to do larger than a commoditized large business in the online space. So while data is important, taking that data and applying a service proposition around it is also incredibly important. I don't want to talk to my CFO about money. I want to talk to him about opportunity. Marketing is a competitive advantage for a business, and more important than money is ingenuity. And when the money tightens, the ingenuity has to grow even more. So what I'm looking for from my teams for the next year is not to worry all day and night about what the budget is, but it's what are you going to do with the money you have? How are you going to make it work harder? Because I think that's where the real magic happens, not just in the budget on its own. So when it comes to risk taking, there are many things we'll do differently next year than this year. If the ability to spend contracts, which we expect it might, then we'll do more targeted work. We'll get better on segmentation. We'll talk less to fewer people, but more effectively. We'll find loyalty and retention as a bigger objective than acquisition.
They did it in 5 months. And as a result, survived the pandemic at much higher margins and free cash flow, because the only costs you have if you're direct to consumer is manufacturing, logistics of shipping, and customer acquisition costs. That's it. Now, if you have that situation, you're bypassing the traditional distribution, saving 40%, and that goes right back into the business. So for me, it's if you're spending money on marketing, are you constantly experimenting with new ideas? So I've always said to my companies, I want a third of marketing to be experimental every quarter. Because if you're just sitting on your laurels doing the same old crap, you're missing out and your competitors are going to do something else. So start experimenting, because the value of something that works, that you find through just creative chaos, is extremely higher than what you've already been doing, because you start losing yields right away. Whatever your strategy is, and let's say you're getting a 2% response on it, watch 6 months from now, it'll be 1.7 or 1.5. What's the next thing? What's the next idea? What's the next drop? What's new? Because it's so noisy out there, as you all know, you've got to keep creating. And everybody has the tools to do that. Obviously, yields are way down from 2 years ago because of what Apple did on privacy, but that doesn't mean you can't fix it.
In this environment, and I'll ask you, Rustam, when you think about big ideas and everything that MasterCard has stood for over the years, what's the right balance there between brand versus performance?
Sure. Look, as a payments company, our ambition or goal is to make payments as safe as possible and as frictionless as possible. And we're constantly innovating to do that. It starts with the consumer, and how do we make that consumer experience at the point of payment just that much better? And no one wakes up in the morning thinking, gee, how am I going to pay today? No, what you want to do is enjoy your life. You want to book that vacation. You want to buy a new pair of clothes. You want to buy a car. You want to make the payment moment as frictionless as possible. So everything we do with innovation is to try and make that happen. Now, as devices exponentially become connected devices, the opportunity to build payments mechanisms into these devices just grows. So I see Kevin wearing a watch or a ring that, if it's a connected device, can become a payments device. You can simply embed the payments technology in there, and you can tap on a NFC code, and you can go from there. So that makes the payment moment frictionless. Now, what we saw during COVID is that a couple of things we were trying, like getting contactless cards.
A shout out for Rustam. Payment systems are so brutally competitive in fintech, it's impossible. Let's take a use case of a credit card. The chance that you could launch a credit card in this market, in my mind as an investor, 0 probability of success, because you'll never acquire customers. Here's one, built. This is a MasterCard. What this guy did, first time I ever invested, I own a piece of this company. He came to me and said, I'm going to use community. I'm going to go to every renter in America and let them pay their rent on a credit card. How crazy is that idea? Because I said, it'll never happen. You can't shave 3% out of a landlord. He said, no, the landlords pay nothing. We're going to make this work for the landlords and make our money on all the other things people do with this card. There he had a plan to go to a community and use social media to say, you pay rent? You want to increase your credit score? Use Built. This thing is the fastest growing card in America. His CAC is low because if you rent, you want this. I knew it was going to work when my daughter and son called me and said, there's a waiting list. You got to call the guy up. You're an owner. I need the card. They were screaming to get their rent paid on it because it's $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month that they're getting credit for. Brilliant, brilliant idea. That's using community. That's using social media. That's a payment system. But the key there is he figured out CAC. Everybody else that's trying to launch credit cards goes to 0 almost immediately. They can't compete with MasterCard, American Express, Visa. It's impossible to gain share against those guys.